Real quick, if you're into what we talk about here, you'll probably love the free stuff we've got waiting for you at papernapkinwisdom.com. Tools, templates, all that good stuff. It's free. Just ask. You can even head over to social. The link's in the bio.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govind Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govind Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 276. Welcome, family. If you've tuned in before, you know our show is a place where the world's brightest entrepreneurs and leaders distill their biggest insights onto a single square paper napkin. Today, I'm sitting down with someone whose leadership wake-up call has been shaking managers out of autopilot for more than 2 decades. Meet Courtney Ramsey. She's a keynote speaker and learning development pro who's trained tens of thousands of frontline supervisors to become confident, people-first leaders. From her corporate roots in HR and leadership and development to her TEDx stage appearances, Courtney has built a reputation for helping overwhelmed managers wake up and lead. Her best-selling playbook of practical tips pushes teams to quit delaying conversations and decisions that matter most. Now, as you imagine what might happen when a seasoned leadership strategist boils her entire philosophy down to a single handwritten note, you might begin to wonder how that napkin could apply to your own day-to-day challenges. In this episode, we explore the hidden cost of pressing later, the power of discomfort as data, and the surprisingly simple habits that ignite momentum without ever sacrificing your people in the process. So lean in, get curious, and allow yourself to notice which part of Courtney's story resonates most strongly with you. Because by the end of our conversation, you may discover that the very thing you've been postponing is exactly where your next breakthrough lies. Let's listen in. Courtney Ramsey, welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have our conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thrilled to be here.
Yeah, so first of all, for people listening, Courtney was extremely generous. I had to reschedule last minute, and here we are. So you're smiling and ready to go. And you shared a really, well, I think, interesting, considering what we're going to be talking about. And I wanted to give you the preface that we kind of broke the rule of your napkin in setting up from yesterday to today. But your paper napkin was quit hitting snooze. Why did you share that with me?
So it's funny. I've had this philosophy now since about 2018. And the way the philosophy came about is I was in this speakers academy because I do lots of public speaking for a living. And I had to think of like a speech to be like the culmination of this academy. And I was like, what is it? What is it? What can I think about? And somehow just out of nowhere, this quit hitting snooze philosophy hit me. And I think it's really about a philosophy that I've kind of stuck with my life. Like I don't do anything fast. Like I am a slow mover and I like to think about things. I like to get other people's opinions. And sometimes I can overthink to the point where it's like that age old thing, analysis paralysis. And it finally hit me. Sometimes you just got to quit hitting snooze and you've just got to do the things. That's not so much about, not thinking things through and not being thoughtful about how you're going to accomplish something, but it's about doing the right things that you know are going to be impactful, that you also know you've been avoiding. Because sometimes choosing that courage over the comfort can really impact your life in a very positive way.
I think that's really amazing. I want to go back to the very first thing you said. You said that this philosophy, and I think you're deliberate about the word philosophy because it wasn't a thought. It wasn't this fleeting thing. It became a philosophy. So why are you calling this a philosophy? I think there's significance to that term. Am I wrong?
I agree. No, I think you caught that really quickly. It's, there's sometimes you stumble across things in your life that really change the way you look at life. For me, this was that. It kind of in one quick sentence, 3 words, it put into focus for me how in the past X years of my life, that thing. I don't move fast. I like to overthink. I like to really choose the perfect time when in reality, sometimes there is no perfect time. So in one three-word sentence, it crystallized for me how I need to start looking at life differently. Because sometimes we hit snooze so often that we fall into this, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it one day. And then one day never arrives. And then you have lots of big regrets. So for me, it was a philosophy that I could start thinking in my head, okay, Courtney, are you snoozing on this? Is this something that you're putting off when you know you need to do it? And if you just got it over with, life could be so much easier and better. Even if sometimes on the other side of that thing, it doesn't go the way you want it to. At least now you know, and you're not wasting all that time and energy and brain real estate mulling over and rethinking about it and, having it on the back of your mind as something you have to do, but you keep putting off.
So it feels like, okay, so you talked about how many times in the past you don't do anything fast. You even said that. I don't do anything fast, right? And I think in that there are a lot of people that don't align with that. That people are they get caught overthinking things. They get caught thinking too deeply about things and just running in a cycle. And I love how you talked about it being brain real estate. You're just taking up space because this space is finite in terms of what we can give our attention.
It is.
So talk about this moment when you catch yourself. So how do you catch yourself reaching for the alarm clock and pressing snooze, metaphorically, obviously? How do you when it comes to a decision, how do you notice that now versus the way you were?
For me, I notice it shows up as anxiety. So, we all have those things that wake us up at 2 or 3 in the morning and your brain starts spinning on it almost immediately when you come into consciousness and you're like, oh, it just hits you out of nowhere. That for me is a big old red flag that I am hitting snooze on this thing. I need to take care of it sooner rather than later. So for me, anxiety is waking up in 2 or 3 in the morning, but it's also that gut feeling where you're just like, oh, it's weighing on you. And that's when I've got to pay attention to this and I need to make a decision.
So are you now, so some people get really hard on themselves when they notice this pattern coming back up and up and up and up and up. It sounds like you're gentler with yourself in that. You're just noticing it. And I think there's a part of having a philosophy that works for you is also being gentler with the signs that you need to evoke that philosophy, that learning, that step forward. And it sounds like you're just noticing it. You're not admonishing yourself. You're not adding another cycle of beating yourself up. You're just moving forward. Am I wrong in that?
I think I'm working towards that. I think I am that person who is definitely a recovering perfectionist, the person who really wants to be more compassionate towards myself. And it's hard because you just have, I'm that girl who has the high expectations of myself, probably more so than anyone else would ever have of me. But I know that's not the healthiest way to be. So to your point, I think I'm working towards becoming more compassionate, more gentle, more patient. And in return, I'm also working to do the same towards how I feel about other people, because I think we're all just doing the best we can with what we got, you know?
For sure. So you notice the anxiety, it shows up for you as anxiety, these waking thoughts or this pit of your stomach feeling. And then you talked about choosing courage over comfort. Do you have a process that you follow or maybe a method that you follow to make that choice to move forward?
Well, I find that a lot of times the things that I'm most stressed over, the things that I'm hitting snooze on the most, often have to deal with other people. I don't know if that works for you too, but sometimes it's the conversations you need to have, the conflict you need to address. And it's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about teaching other people a process to have tough conversations. So the first thing I usually try to do is I think about what's the worst that can happen? That kind of perspective shifting. Or you think, okay, if I don't do this, what's the worst that can happen? Or if I do this, what's the worst that can happen? And can I live with that? And most of the time, the answer is yes. I'd rather sometimes know and get it out of my head and at least have some sort of resolution than to spend the next 5, 10, 15 years of my life spinning like a truck stuck in the mud over this.
Mm-hmm.
So I ask myself that question, and then I start thinking about my intent. What do I want for myself? And what do I want for the other person? What do I want in the long term? And how can I work towards vocalizing that intent? I don't know about you, but a lot of times when you have conversations that don't go so well, or you have conflict that when you try to talk about it, it becomes worse, not better. I think it's because the other person might be assuming negative intent rather than assuming positive intent. So I find that if you can just say the thing out loud and try to level set that conversation before you go into it, that can be really helpful in not only keeping you on track mentally as to why you're even going through this hard, awkward, uncomfortable thing, but it helps the other person also realize that you're coming from a good place.
Mm. I think that's really interesting. So number one, really looking at what's the worst that could happen on both sides. I think one of the things that we tend to do is think about what's the worst that could happen if things don't go as planned. But you're saying, what if you do it and still the worst happens? And I think that's something that dissuades people from acting still. But you're looking at what could happen either way, and just acknowledging that that's a possibility. And I like that unique lens. I think that's a different way of looking at it. The other thing that I think is really interesting is there's a lot of very good work that's been done around intent, holding a positive intention, holding a loving intention before a difficult and controversial conversation, making sure that you're clear on that. But you're taking it like one step further than that and declaring that intent clearly, right? So
correct.
Are you actually, just so I understand, you're in the conversation before you begin, you say, hey, I just want to make sure that I let you know that I really care about you and I want this to work out well. So can we have that in the front of our minds before we continue our conversation? Is that the kind of way
that's basically it? That's exactly it. So let's pretend that you and I are business partners, and maybe you said something that really hurt my feelings to the point where but to the point where I can't get over it, right? And I know I need to discuss it with you. I can either keep sitting here and ruminating over it and trying to let it go, or I can just have a conversation with you, right? So I might come to you and say, you know what? I really care about you as my friend and as my business partner. And I know that you and I care about each other and we want to have a strong relationship. There's something that came up the other day that I'm having a hard time letting go, but I know if we talk about it together, we can get through it. Would you be willing to talk about that with me?
That's awesome.
And now, hopefully, coming in, oh, Courtney cares. She already said we can get through it if we just talk about it. So this is not like an end to our friendship or our business partnership, right? Hopefully that would perk your ears up and make you lean in and say, absolutely, Courtney, let's talk about it. So that's kind of the state of it.
I love that. And I love that you're also not adding what a lot of people do in that is an assumption. At least I didn't hear it, which was saying, I know you would never want to do anything to hurt me. You didn't say that. You didn't you didn't project an assumption onto it. You simply stayed in intention for the moment. You stayed in the present moment and then flipped to, hey, but this thing happened and I haven't been able to let it go, which actually is very vulnerable because you're actually speaking of where you deal with things in anxiety, right? That you hold that forward. Do you think that for other people who maybe don't have, I asked you how it shows up for you and it shows up in anxiety, but it can show up in different ways for other people, right? It can show up
for sure
in stress has this different way of showing up for different people. So being declarative and honest about how it shows up for you probably adds some texture and context to the conversation that builds that bridge around vulnerability, doesn't it?
Agreed. And I think the vulnerability part is really hard for a lot of people, but I found that saying that part out loud verbally can really humanize you and help the other person, I like to say, keep their defense wall down. Because if I come at you and in a way and I say something that's going to make those defenses go up where you're kind of on guard, it's really hard for me to get those defenses back down for us to have that conversation and be in the moment. But if I can be vulnerable with you and I'm uncomfortable or I'm hurting or I'm actually nervous about having this conversation, and I say that out loud, that humanizing quality can really help people stay in the right place where they're psychologically safe enough to have that conversation.
So I really love this. Let's tease this out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere out there right now, someone's listening and they're saying, well, wait a minute. I don't really want to be all that vulnerable with a bunch of people. I don't want to
Yeah.
really like show that I'm hurt or weak or sad or mad or glad.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to that person?
I get it. I would say I completely understand where you're coming from, because when you think about how our society is, we've been conditioned to not show weakness. Think about social media. We only show the highlights of our life. We show everything going right. We show us at our absolute best, even when we're faking it. But when you think about it, we all have those vulnerable minutes and moments of our lives. And a lot of times we just wear a mask to cover it up. I would argue that even though it's super uncomfortable, the more you can admit to that vulnerability, even if you just quickly mention it, it's going to help you in the long run. But it's a shift, because that's not what we're taught. And that's not how we're programmed our entire life. But it really does help the other person understand that you're coming at this conversation or this conflict resolution from a good place. And you're not all macho ego. I'm going to figure this out. We're going to put you in your place. It's not about that. It's about coming at this from two people who earnestly want to make our relationship better. And I'm going to be human enough to tell you I'm hurt, right? It's hard though.
Yeah, it is hard. And what I really think is really powerful about what you just did, and I hope people listening will notice this, when I challenge you about how would you handle this, the first thing you did was acknowledge it, right? You say, I get it. And I think that acknowledging how somebody else might be showing up is a great way to find some common ground, because it's easy to do. It's easy to acknowledge that somebody might be feeling hesitation or some
Absolutely.
challenge with something, right? So, so I think that was really powerful that you did, and you just sort of dropped it right there. The other thing that let's explore this from a different perspective. You talked about being business partners or friends, and that infers a closer relationship. Is this the kind of thing that can also work with people that you're less closely associated with? Maybe it's a vendor or a
Yes.
supplier or infrequent customer. How does it work there?
Yeah. So actually, I think it's even more important when you're having a difficult conversation with someone maybe you're not as close to, because they don't know you and they don't know your heart. They have very limited data points of who you are and what you're about. So when you think about that, that leaves open data to their brain for them to just make assumptions and draw conclusions based on the very few data points they have. So if anything, it's more important to have an intent statement, as I call it, to kick off a tough conversation with like a vendor who maybe you've had two interactions with. Because then again, they are hearing you out loud say, you care, you want to resolve this, you're coming at this from a good place. So please don't think I'm coming at this with negative intent. I think intent statements are important no matter when you start a conversation, because sometimes even with like your spouse, who maybe you've been married for 20 years, they still need to know you're coming at this from a good place. But it's especially important when someone doesn't know you all that well and they don't have a lot of history with you. That's
a really important reminder. I think one of the things that, we talk a lot about in Paper Napkin Wisdom is connection before content. It's important to connect with people as individuals, as humans, as people, before you dive into anything else. And if you do that, and you do it authentically. You can't do it. It's not like a checklist that you're going down and going, yep, check, connection. But if you've actually connected with somebody, it is beautiful lubricant for the conversation that follows, right? Isn't it? And
very true.
And I think that's a very insightful point that you made, that with people you don't know, they have very limited data points about you. it's almost all filled in the gap by assumption.
Exactly.
So, right. So it's so important to dispel
Mm-hmm.
that. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really insightful. What do what are the other benefits that you've seen of this intent statement in a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
maybe not even in that conversation, but universally, like energetically that follows? What does it open up for you otherwise?
Hmm. I like that's a great question. Like energetically, I don't do a great job of setting my intention for the day. Like you hear people waking up and they set their intention for the day, and this is what I'm trying to do. I don't do the best at that. I'm trying to get better at that. But I love having almost like a plan because I really do think what you focus on is what you focus on, right? And
Mhm.
that it can absolutely come into fruition because that is where you're placing your energy. So I think the more we can set our intentions, the more we will focus our energy on that outcome. And we have a better chance of reaching the things we really want. It's definitely something I'm working on though.
So you're almost using the plant the tree analogy, right? Like, the best time to set your intention may be in a
80
journal
years
at the beginning
ago,
of the morning. However,
right?
the next best time is right now. Right. So,
Absolutely.
so just because you didn't do
Absolutely.
it earlier doesn't mean you
Correct.
can't do it 12 times during the day also,
Correct.
right?
I actually did that with you. Yeah. Before we jumped on this call, I was like, I'm not sure what's going to come out of this conversation because what I love about you is you are very organic in how you do your podcast. But I just hope that the right things come out for whoever might be listening to this podcast with you and I for what they need to hear.
Mm.
So you're
Did
right.
you
I
did you
like that.
think of
The
a
tree
did you think
analogy
of a
is
worst
great.
did you think of a worst case scenario? By the way.
Not with this one. Not with this one. No, I did not.
All right. I appreciate your faith. So that's really great. I really think there's a lot of power in that, and I hadn't connected the dots on this intent statement being an opportunity to reframe several points during the day. It almost is
Absolutely.
it's almost like you know in Monopoly when you get into jail, it's a get out of jail card that you have all the time, and the jail is your own thinking, the prison of your own mind in some ways.
It's a good analogy. Yeah.
Right. So that's I'm really struck by this. So I love this idea around going back. You said that sometimes we're often hitting snooze around difficult
Mhm.
conversations with other people. Do you
Yes.
feel that do you feel that we hit snooze on difficult conversations with ourselves as well?
Oh, yes, we absolutely do. And when you think about it, those are the most important conversations of all. The
Right.
conversations you have with yourself are the most important conversations because there's so much of what we're doing every day that is a result of those conversations you're having with yourself. And I know me personally, I've hit snooze on lots of things when it comes to you really need to do a better job of X, Y, and Z, or I would really love to be the person who does this thing. It's very easy to put yourself last.
So how do
Mhm.
you what's the preamble to that conversation with yourself? You gave us the what's the worst that can happen either way, and the statement of
Mhm.
intent when it comes to
Mhm.
starting conversations with other people. But how do you
Mhm.
start that conversation with yourself?
Mm. I think first and foremost, you have to make the space to have the
Mm,
conversation with yourself. I don't know about you, but I feel like I have 1,000 plates spinning in my head at all times. Not to mention, I have some ADHD tendencies. So I feel like there's almost like a pinball machine going on in my head. It's like it's just always things are bouncing around. So, first and foremost, making space to have that conversation and trying to get quiet for you to actually think things through. That's
okay.
the first and foremost thing. And then I start thinking about my long-term outcomes. And I don't change the process too much. I really think about if I don't do this, what's going to happen? If I do this, what's going to happen? And a lot of times what serves me the most is thinking about potentially the regret I would have for not moving forward with something. For example, I left my corporate position with J.C. Penney here in the States back in 2017. And I had to make a really hard decision to leave a job that I really loved for the chance to start my own business. And that was scary. Anytime you quit a well-paying job with benefits and a paycheck, right? And I essentially went back to paying myself my starting salary out of college. It was scary, scary, scary. But I thought to myself, if I don't do this, am I going to regret this when I'm 65, 75, 85? And the answer was a resounding yes. So I thought to myself, the worst that could happen is I'm not going to be able to make ends meet. But you know what? That is what driving Uber and waiting tables is for.
Right.
If I have to go back to the Cheesecake Factory and wait some tables, I can do that because that was darn good money. And I really thought about that too. Like, are you going to regret this if you don't try it? And if the answer is yes, you need to push forward.
You know, it's really funny that you say that. I recently had a really powerful conversation with a gentleman by the name of John Sleeman. John Sleeman built one of the largest brewing companies in Canada from scratch. And, he started it in the 80s and built it up to this amazing brand. And becoming a big beer company is difficult business because you're competing against billion-dollar companies. But he had that same core philosophy. What's the worst that could happen? And am I okay with that? And he was like, so he literally said, what's the big deal? I go work at McDonald's for a while. It's going to be okay. And
it's going to be okay.
I'm sitting here, like anywhere you go in that part of the world that he's from, you see these big Sleeman trucks driving all over the place. But to hear that from him and then hear that sort of echoed from you is really, really a powerful reminder that anchoring yourself that I'm going to be okay.
You are.
Is so liberating, isn't it?
It is. It is. And sometimes it's hard to convince yourself of that. But when you think about it, you've always been okay. You've always gotten through hard things in your life. You've gotten through, if you were to really start to list out all the things you've gotten through in your life, you would probably be amazed. So I think we just have to remind ourselves we've gotten through tough times before, we'll get through them again. And I know, resilience is something you're looking at as a kind of an overall general theme for this year, but that's how we build up more resilience is we get through the hard stuff. You don't read about it in a book, you live it.
Right. And when you get a chance to take these moments, either in conversation with other people or in conversation with yourself, part of it is you're reminding yourself of the path that you've traveled, the learnings you've had. And nothing builds momentum like that kind of recognition, right? So that gets you off the snooze button really fast, doesn't it?
It does. It can, if you let yourself. You've got to be gentle enough, going back to your gentleness philosophy, right? You got to be gentle enough and compassionate with yourself to almost speak to yourself like your best friend would be speaking to you. I know we've all heard this before too, right? But sometimes we can be so harsh with ourselves. What would you say to your best friend when they're struggling with moving forward? You would probably remind them of all the success they've had in the past. And just like you said, can you work at McDonald's if you had to? Absolutely. Right. So if we could just all come up with that philosophy too, of just speaking to yourself as you would someone you truly cared about, we would find those conversations with ourselves do go better and easier.
That's amazing. So Courtney, this brings us to the stage in our conversation where I not only appreciate you, but I want to do a shout out to a former guest of ours. His name was John Ruhlin, wrote a great book called Giftology. But before he became well known for his legacy, he shared a very inspiring napkin with us, which was what you appreciate appreciates. And I think you've given us a little lens on that. And as a hat tip to him, he passed away rather suddenly, and we've been sort of evoking his legacy with every paper napkin conversation that we have by asking our guests to shout out someone at the end of the conversation. So laying some appreciation on the world and paying it forward, paying John's legacy forward. Is there someone you'd like to shout out?
Yes, I would love to shout out my husband, Brad, because back in the day when I was considering leaving that corporate job, he was the one who put the stamp of approval on it and almost gave the okay. Now, and I don't want to say that sounds a little funny, like no one should have to okay your decisions, but when you're in a partnership, especially a marriage, it matters, right? What the other person is doing and thinking and whether or not they're on board with it. And I could not have done all that I've done since 2017 without his support. without his genuine belief in me. So I want to shout him out and thank him for all of that, because I feel like he's a big part of why I'm able to do what I do.
Oh, that's powerful. Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
Courtney, thank you for jolting us awake with your rallying cry to quit hitting snooze. Your blend of tough love and practical tools reminds every leader that the moment we stop delaying is the moment momentum starts. So here's some key takeaways. Notice the alarm. Hesitation is data. Act on it. Discomfort is not equal to danger. Growth lives on the edge of unease. The 60-second rule. Decide, delegate, or diary in under a minute. Momentum over perfection. Launch imperfectly. Refine relentlessly. I love to call that make it bad and make it better. Lead with questions. Curiosity unlocks ownership and innovation. If this episode sparked insight, allow yourself to imagine how many more breakthroughs await. Subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen. Then share the link with one leader who keeps pressing later. Right now, before the day slips by, grab a napkin and write the one conversation you've been snoozing on. Snap a pic if you're brave and post it with the hashtag #PaperNapkinWisdom. How will acting on the single conversation that you're delaying transform your team before the next sunrise? Remember, positive intent without action is just a dream. Intention fused with deliberate motion turns small ideas into big results, starting the instant you stop hitting snooze. Make it a great day.